कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः.
So the two categories are exclusive knowledge pursuit or Kevala Jnana Nishtha, which is the Upanishadic sadhana, and the other part is the interactional sadhana or the sadhana of Bhagavad Gita, which is a blend of all kinds of sadhana like Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, all blended together to take us to that ultimate goal. But truly speaking, the Bhagavad Gita sadhana, as it defines in the second chapter, 48th verse, it is Samatva Yoga. He says, Siddhya Siddhyo Samo Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Yoga Uchyate. Yoga is defined as evenness, equality in Siddhi and Asiddhi, success and failure. So what we have to do is constantly throughout the interactive period or the meditative period or contemplative period, throughout the day, we have to ruminate, we have to be aware of this truth. How can we be? Whatever we interact with, the mind absorbs the corresponding qualities. Suppose you stay with a person who is very angry and agitated, you will find that very soon you will also feel anger and agitation in your mind. You can try it. It is true of everybody. It happens. Similarly, it is said in Yoga Vasishtha also, how to know a saint. You go near the saint. Even if you don't speak, you just sit before him. You will find that a calm dawns in your mind. It is like an inner bath, that the whole inner being gets soaked in cool water. A calm dawns. Whatever we are interacting with, we inherit the corresponding quality. That happens in the physical world also. When some cold body is kept in contact with a hot body, the heat flows from the hot to the cold. The cold becomes hotter and the hot becomes cooler. There is an exchange of quality. Everywhere it is like that. When a running ball hits a standing ball, the energy is transferred from the running ball to the standing ball. Everywhere it is happening. So for the case of our mind also, this is always what happens. That whatever the mind interacts with, it absorbs the property of that. So unless we spend mind hours on this truth, in the thought of this truth, the more and more we think of this spiritual knowledge, we devote to this spiritual knowledge, more and more the mind absorbs the properties of the soul, the properties of the truth. It becomes more and more converged, it becomes more and more uniform. It gets rid of its fragmented qualities, of its fragmentation, of its dissipation. That is how we have to build up our own spiritual quotient so that we can retain whatever we are hearing, whatever we are listening. So, as the objective interactions are always taking our mind outward, we have to generate the centripetal force ourselves to bring back the mind, reminding it of our core identity. The process of doing it is called vichara or introspection. It is called introspection. In Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, Vasishtha Deva says, Vicharat tikshnatam dhihi pashyati parampadam samsara dirgharogasya vicharohi mahaushadham. Vicharat tikshnatam dhihi pashyati parampadam samsara dirgharogasya vicharohi mahaushadham. He says that by constant vichara, constant rumination, constant analysis, constant introspection on the truth, what happens is that the buddhi which is always collecting grossness from the world, being always engaged in the gross thoughts, the mind and the buddhi are collecting grossness from the world, fragmentation from the world, dross from the world, selfishness from the world. That mind and buddhi starts getting purified, purified, purified. It becomes sharper, it becomes subtler. Because the concept we are dealing with is universal, subtle, pure. So by interacting with that concept, our mind starts gaining purity, universality, subtlety. Vichara tikshnatam pashyati param padam. By that, by this constant process of making the buddhi and the mind subtle, pure and uniform, universal, the buddhi starts visualizing, starts seeing the ultimate goal, the truth. It starts remaining in touch with the truth. Samsara dirgha rogasya vicharo hi mahaushadham. Vasishtadeva says that this dirgha roga, this long disease called worldliness, samsara means not just the world, it is the worldliness in our mind. The world will remain where it is. By becoming a knower, for the knower, the world will not change, the world will not vanish before him. What will change is his mind. He will be freed of the worldliness, that is, it is always getting attracted and repelled by the likes and dislikes of the world. His mind will become free of the likes and dislikes, and his mind will be freed of the worldliness. So, whatever program we may attend, be it a bhajan, be it a very good lecture, inspiring lecture, or be it any other elevating program, the effect of that will not remain unless we are given to vichara. Throughout the day, we have to remember the effect of the listening and ruminate on the truth repeatedly, so that the mind, intelligence, emotion, complex, it undergoes the transformation process by constantly getting modified, purified, transformed through this interaction with the concepts we listen to. That is the purpose of holding these sessions, and that is the purpose of disseminating the knowledge. So, our topic for this series is Bhagavad Gita, a revolutionary message for transforming life. Now, naturally the question will be that why we are calling it a revolutionary message. There are many reasons for that. Let us start from the backdrop. We should not neglect the backdrop in which the message is given. In our scriptures, various situations are created in which the message is given, from a rishi to a householder, from a rishi to the king. For example, in Mundakopanishad, Shaunaka, who was a great householder, who had done all the yagas, yajnas, everything he had practiced. He was a mature householder. And from his statements, we find that he had already outlived all the worldly desires. Maybe he had lived a fulfilling life in the world and outlived all the worldly desires. He only wanted to know the truth, which he had heard of, but he had not taken to a real practice. So he approaches Angiras, the rishi in the forest, and asks him, Kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvamidam vijñātam bhavati iti. He asked that, O Bhagavan, by knowing what everything becomes known, that means we become doubtless about our life, about the world, about the truth. That means he had at least the rudimentary idea of the truth, that by knowing something, we will no more have any inquiry, no more have any craving for further knowledge. By knowing what, everything will become known. The statement itself means that there is one truth to be known, by knowing which we will no more have any doubt and inquiry. So he goes to Angiras and asked, Kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvamidam vijñātam bhavati iti. So in reply to that, Angiras starts his message, and that is what Mundaka Upanishad is. Similarly, in Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, we find that Rama had undergone a dejection at 16th year of his life. When he first came out of the palace and went around for a pilgrimage to various places of India, he came back and he was absolutely depressed, dejected by seeing the affairs of the world. Before that he did not know, he did not have the exposure to the world, but the exposure to the world made him absolutely depressed and dejected. And Dasharatha, King Dasharatha, did not know what to do with his son. The son stopped taking food, stopped going to the elders, prostrating before them, stopped reading. He only sat inside thinking and thinking in a depressed mood. In Dasharatha's assembly, when the rishis came, Vishwamitra and Vasishtha happened to come there, then Dasharatha told him about the plight Rama is undergoing. Immediately Vasishtha understood, Vishwamitra also understood, that Rama's case cannot be treated by ordinary medicines. He has to be given the spiritual treatment because his mind is getting depressed by the reality he is seeing of the world. So he should be given the knowledge of the truth with which he will be able to bear whatever is there in the world, and he will be able to rule the kingdom also with propriety. So this Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, which is a huge scripture, Prakarana Grantha, there Vasishtha Deva is preaching Rama, and the whole in Dasharatha's assembly, in the Ayodhya assembly, and there are so many other Muni Rishis and other ministers, kings, everybody was sitting around. The discourse started early in the morning and continued till the evening. Early in the morning, Dasharatha along with his children used to walk to Vasishtha Deva's cottage humbly and request the saint to come and give them the enlightenment by which they can get relieved of the samsara roga, of the worldliness, the disease of worldliness. And throughout the day the discourse will continue. In the evening again, Rama and his brothers used to follow Vasishtha, leading him, taking him, leaving him in his cottage and come back. So it was a peaceful setting of the palace where the knowledge is given. In the first case of Mundaka Upanishad, it was a peaceful, lonely setting of a hermitage inside the forest where the knowledge was given. In Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, it is on the bank of the river where for 7 days Shukadeva continued to speak, and Raja Parikshit sat there without food, without drink, only listening, ruminating, contemplating, and occasionally asking questions, and again listening, until he merged, his being got dissolved in the truth, in his real identity, until he got completely fused in his real identity. That is also a peaceful setting. Like that we can look into various other scriptures also. In all the cases, it is a peaceful setting where a rishi is delivering the message, delivering this knowledge to some king or prince or some householder. The setting is like that. It is only in Bhagavad Gita where we have a very unusual setting. It is a war field. It is, Bhagavad Gita appears in Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata war, one of the greatest war that our country had experienced, it was just about to begin. Both the forces were already assembled in the battlefield, and the war was about to begin. At that time, suddenly Arjuna felt that he will not be able to fight the war. And Krishna started giving him the message. And throughout the message, what is it? He is repeatedly asking Arjuna, Tasmat yudhyasva bharata, Tasmat yudhyasva bharata. After each message of the soul, of the reality, of the truth, he is telling Arjuna to fight. Not only that, at one point after listening to Sri Krishna's message on the knowledge of the soul and how a knower behaves, what happens to a person when he attains this knowledge, Arjuna says that, "Oh Krishna, if you are putting this knowledge in the highest level, then why are you asking me to fight? I would rather leave this war field, go to the forest, live on alms, beg, and live a sannyasin's life and contemplate on this truth." Krishna forcefully, chidingly tells Arjuna that no, you are not fit for it. He says, "Karmani eva adhikaraha te, karmani eva te adhikaraha." Your fitness is in karma, not in kevala jnana nishtha, sitting in the forest and contemplating on the knowledge, on the truth. Arjuna, you will not be able to do, because you have been contemplating on this war for the last 13 or 14 years. So how can you suddenly leave everything and go and start contemplating on the truth? You will not be able to do it. You are not fit for exclusive pursuit of wisdom, remaining secluded, remaining out of all interactions. This is the common problem with all of us here, that when we try to meditate, our mind doesn't get absorbed in the meditation. When we try to read the scriptures, we are not able to keep our concentration. That is the complaint we hear from everybody. Because our mind is in the worldly interactions. It has not got out of the delusion of the attraction and repulsion of the world. As long as it is like that, we will not be fit for kevala jnana nishtha or exclusive knowledge pursuit, shravana, manana, nididhyasana alone. We will not be fit for it. The fitness for shravana, manana, nididhyasana or kevala jnana nishtha is very well described in our scriptures. It is called sadhana chatushtaya. I will not elaborate on it now. It is called viveka, vairagya, shamadamadi, shadga sampattihi and mumuksha. These are the fourfold qualities. They are not separated from each other. They are all interdependent. One will lead to the other will enhance the previous one. So this sadhana chatushtaya, when a person has enough of this sadhana chatushtaya, then he can take to this exclusive knowledge pursuit. But such people are very few, especially at a young age, when our faculties are very powerful, faculties are very alert. At that time to take to this spiritual pursuit, the sadhana chatushtaya, unless we will not be able to do it. So what for the others? What will others do? That is why we find that the Upanishadic sadhana was only restricted to very few people. It was not for the common man. But Bhagavad Gita, by its revolutionary message, it has brought the sadhana for the common man. It gives us the assurance that anybody, anywhere in the world, engaged in any field of activity or any phase of his life, can take to this sadhana. There is only one condition for that, that one must have the earnestness and the seriousness and sincerity to grow to this ultimate dimension. If he wants to grow in this path, if he wants to attain this goal, then following the suggestions, the prescriptions, the sadhana prescribed by the Bhagavad Gita, one can try, and in a step-by-step method, he will attain the same goal as is attained by the Upanishadic sadhana of kevala jnana nishtha. So here the backdrop is revolutionary, because here the place where this discourse is taking place is a war field, and that also just when the war is about to begin. At that point Sri Krishna is advising Arjuna. And who is the guru, who is the disciple here? Both are administrators, both are kings or aristocrats, both are warriors. Sri Krishna is advising Arjuna, sitting on the chariot which is about to go into the war field and fight the war. So this backdrop itself, is it not indicative of the usefulness of the knowledge in our practical life, our interactive life? Can we think of a more involving interaction than this kind of a war? It is not even the war of present kind, where the chief will be sitting in his room, in his control room, and instructing the aircrafts to go and bomb or anything of that sort. It's a direct involvement, one-to-one fight, where the Arjuna, the disciple in Bhagavad Gita, within a few hours will have to kill people. Not only that, kill his own people, own grandfather, own teacher, and many other kith and kin. Can we imagine? Our imagination has to be taken to that height and try to figure out the situation. Can the mind be more involved than it had been for Arjuna in the war field, or Sri Krishna also? So in such a situation, this discourse is given. So is it not meant to be applied in our interactive life, where the interactions are not so engrossing, involving as the Mahabharata war? So certainly it is a revolutionary setup that Mahabharata, through Mahabharata, Vedavyasa has presented, or maybe Sri Krishna has presented. It is written in Mahabharata. So the final presentation is by Vedavyasa. So that very backdrop is revolutionary. Even the guru and the disciple are also revolutionary character, because they are not a rishi who is no more involved in the interactive world. And the disciple also is not a Vairagyan who is no more involved in the interactions of the world. Both are fully in the world and about to get involved in one of the most involved interaction, the war. Now, about the applicability of the message also, there is a great revolutionary concept in it. We must try to understand that. In the Upanishadic pursuit, the worldly involvements are regarded as hindrance. They were no more involved, they were not interested in anything, they have left everything. They are all renunciates who were practicing this knowledge, this sadhana. Here it is not so. In Bhagavad Gita, instead of considering the activities to be hindrance to our pursuit, they are presented as instruments which will take us to liberation. Mark my word. We are generally considering the activities as hindrance to our spiritual pursuit. Is it not so? Here also, after listening to Swamiji, the people who come and they report, all of them say that, but Swamiji, how can we pursue this? We are always involved in our household duties. We are involved, so much is stress, so much is the professional stress. How can we pursue this knowledge? So the problem is same with them also. They are considering the worldly interactions to be hindrance. But Bhagavad Gita is repeatedly stressing that the worldly interactions are not a hindrance, but they are actually to be made instrument for liberation. That means they will help us to move towards liberation. Because our mind is haunted by selfishness, haunted by likes and dislikes, haunted by fear. So it is always cluttered with the worldliness. How to purify that mind? For those who have not acquired enough of the sadhana chatushtaya, so that their mind is not attracted to the worldly attractions or repelled by anything in the world, such mind first will have to become purified, have to be purified. They have to expand, and that has to be done through the interactions. If we leave the interactions and go to the forest, by that we are losing both the grounds. In the forest also, if we sit for meditation or contemplation on the truth, We will not be able to meditate or contemplate because our mind will be given to the various worldly thoughts. That mind will not come away from that. And because we have left the interactions and come away to the secluded forest, we will not have the opportunity to purify ourselves through the interaction. So Bhagavad Gita says that let it be whatever you are doing, whatever be your interactions, you continue with that. But I am only asking you to change your attitude, the purpose for which you are getting involved in the activities, the purpose of the activities. You change your outlook, you change your vision, and that will make your whole life a pursuit.